Well, good morning, and welcome to a new week, a new day here in Lagos studio, Lagoon Radio. You are listening to us from Marina, Lagos State, broadcasting from the Diocesan Palace. And today is 11th, today is the 15th, so help me Lord, of November 2021. And right about now, it's 38 minutes past the hour of 9 a.m. And you already know what time it is. It is time for the newspaper review show here on Lagoon Radio. As always, in no particular order, we have This Nigeria, we have Business AM, we have Daily Champion, the Nigerian News Direct. We have Nigerian Pilots, Al Jazeera, we have Daily Independence, This Day Newspaper, New Telegraph, People's Daily, National Economy, the Blueprint Newspaper, Nigerian Tribune, Leadership, Daily Trust, the Punch Newspaper, Daily Sun, The Nation, and yeah. So we're going to try as much as we can to run through all the papers available. My name is Nena Abigail Mba, and I have seated by my side, what's your name?
Hello, Coinsala. Good morning, Lagos, Nigeria.
Okay, all right, you're welcome. And of course, at the direct opposite of the angle, we have Shabuli with Taiwo. Good morning, T.
Good morning.
How's the weather that you're under? Because I know you're under the weather.
Yeah, getting better.
Okay, all right. Okay, so yes, I'm just going to start. We have this Nigeria. I'm going to be starting with this one. It's at the front page, at the top of it, you have Khan raises the alarm over rising prices of cooking gas. And right under that says, high electricity tariff will worsen plight of Nigerians. You can read up more on that on page 7 of this Nigeria. Buhari seeks $40 billion investment deals from South Africa. That is on page 11. The raid on Odeli's resident, Sirab asked UN to prevail on federal government to bring culprits to justice. And the rider under that says, no harm must befall our daughter, Ohaneze warns. All of that can be found on page 7 also of this Nigerian newspaper. Ripples over direct primaries. You can get that on page 6. Governors may prevail on Buhari not to assent. APC can't force its agenda on us, PDP is saying. And CBN begins recovery of anchor borrowers loan. That can be found on page 10. Group records 52 violent cases against women in politics. All of that can be found on page 26 of this Nigeria newspaper. Moving on from that.
So, moving on to the Business AM with me. Nigerians living in economic doomsday amid rising prices. And the rider honor that says Nigerians in teeth gnashing mode. Cost of utilities blow through the roof. LPG, electricity tariffs, meters, new hangmen. Federal government planning more increases as fiscal burden rises. You can read up all of this on page 2 of Business AM newspaper. And on the top part of the paper, it says $136 million made available at COP26 to Nigeria, others for sustainable energy. The writer that says AFDB sealed support for multilateral agencies and foreign governments. African 600 million live without electricity, majority in Nigeria. You can read up more on page 2 of the Business Name paper. And under the visionary voices, we can find the economy that's what's this?
Planetary health requires.
You can read up on page 16. And under the executive knowledge series, innovation is everyone's business. Yes, you can read up more on page 15 of the Business AM. And by the side, we have summaries on finance and investments. It says that UBA assess top analyst picks. You can read up more on page 11. And on page 27, under energy power renewable 30-year-old master plan for power. You can read up more on page 27. And on page 25, under company and business, Standard Bank taps Flutter Wave. Under technology and innovation, managing growth value in five I's. 5 A's. You can read up more on page 30. Under transport and business, franchises in Abuja with carrots. Under commodity and agriculture, biotech for Nigerians, agriculture. You can read up all of these on page 25 of the Business AM.
All right, moving on to the Daily Champion newspaper. At the very top of it, we have insecurity. Federal government slams American organization over terrorism sponsorship allegation. As IPOB demands release of members in Southeast detention facilities. This you find on page 6 of the paper. Anambra election who frustrate Andy Uba's suit against Soludo, says traders, have grounds to challenge his declaration as governor-elect, says Uba. PDP stalwart urges INEC to decentralize production of PVCs. How this you find on page 6 of the Daily Champion newspaper. NDLA intercepts fresh cocaine, heroin consignment at Lagos Seaport and Airport. And right under it says, arrest motor parts dealer, 11 others in Bayelsa, 7 other states for drug trafficking. These you can also find on page 6 of the paper. One is the elders to federal government. Bring invaders of justice orderlies home to book. Also on page 6 of the Daily Champion newspaper. And boldly written on the front page, Wicked talks tough. Says anyone plotting my government's downfall will go down. And right under it says, advises CJ to be diligent and not vindictive. Still on page 6 of the Daily Champion newspaper. And at the very side of it, AFDB approves $150 million to support agriculture in Africa. Also, Buhari in South Africa to seek 40 billion investment. All this you find in the paper. And at the very bottom of it, marine accident, interagency collaboration key to solution. NIMASA Director General. Uzodinma assures diaspora Imo indigenes of security during Yuletide. All these you find in the paper, the Daily Champion newspaper. And at the very bottom of it, subscribers Choco has Glow unleashes innovative services prizes. That'll be all on the Daily Champion.
All right, and then moving on to the Nigerian pilot, SERAP petitions UN over vicious assault on Justice Orderly. That can be found on page 5. VONDG raises alarm, says controversy over direct primary may scuttle electoral bill. That can be found on page 5 also. No coup plot. The rider under that says the Nigerian army denies plot to overthrow President Buhari's government, denies sequel to a trending online publication. Director Army Public Relations Brigadier General Onyema Nwachukwu says their loyalty to the Constitution and CNC not in doubt. Says National Assembly will continue to provide aid to civil authority whenever it's called to do so. And then all of this on the coup can be found on page 8 of the Nigerian pilot. Federal government dismisses Gates' allegation of sponsoring terrorism, says it's distracting. That can also be found on page 5. Niger Delta ethnic nationalities reject inclusion of 3 states in NDDC. That can be found on page 7. NANS blows hot, laments hiking prices of LPG and PMS. That can be found on page 9. U.S. supports Nigerian editors' capacity building with 93 million naira. You can read up more on page 7 of the Nigerian pilot. Smugglers responsible for high cost of rice. The minister is saying on page 8. And new revenue sharing formula coming soon. RMAFC says, and that can be found on page 7. And lastly, on the Nigerian pilot, Buhari in South Africa to seek $40 billion investment. That can be found on page 8 of the Nigerian pilot newspaper.
Moving on to the Nigerian News Direct. Police arrest 2 with human head in Ogun State. You can read up more on page 10. The expert support integrity test in Osun Mega School condemns politician of government decisions. You can read up more on page 2 of Nigerian News Direct. Over to terrorism, federal government denies alleged sponsorship and seeks prayers and support. You can read up more on page 7. Buhari seeks $40 billion deals from Dubai and South Africa. You can read up on these on page 2. And because we have two pictures of the MDs and some high profile individuals boldly written on the page over continental trade investment.
Okay, moving on to you, Shab.
All right, the Nigerian Tribune newspaper at the very top of it will say 1.5 trillion naira COVID-19 fund was spent, says Finance Ministry. This you can find on page 8, and right under it says 1.5 billion naira released for 6 ICT, 24 vocational centers. NAFDAC and IMR got funds for same project. Jobs through homes equipped 200 billion naira. Pardon me. All this you find on page 8 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. APC releases timetable for Ekiti Osun governor poll. Silent on mode of primary. Olujimi 8 other women join Guba race. Attend PDP screening. All this you can find on page 23 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Electoral Act. Buhari will base his decision on public security and economic interest, says Malami. This you can find on page 6 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Nnamdi Kanu match word with action on political solution. Southeast monarchs, bishops tells Malami. Page 23 of the paper. Railway workers meeting with Amechi ends in deadlock. And right under it says, okay, it's quite tiny. Yeah. Okay, well, the story is right on page 7. APC cloud over convention. Aggrieved members fail to shift ground. At the right under it says, consensus tears apart play 2 chapter. Matawali Marafa's field deepens in Zamfara. Ekiti APC faction insists on court case. APC National Secretary Akpabio sustained supremacy contest. Oyo chapter divided over harmonization of state exco. All this you find on page 24 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Okay, still on the front page. Downpour in Lagos damages houses, electric poles, and vehicles. This you find on page 26. Oyo's IGR growth result of hard work. Makinde state ranked 7th on NBS status half year IGR index. This you can find on page 29 as well. Terrorists have regrouped in Lake Chade. Axis Undume raises the alarm. Page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper, and at the very bottom of it, 19 million living with diabetes in Africa to rise to 47 million by 2025, says WHO. This you can also find on page 29. Unilary student beats female lecturer to stupor. Okay, this you can find on page 26. It's going to be an interesting one. We should probably talk about it. Well, it's on page 26. Ogun traditional ruler threatens to lead protest over attacks by land grabbers. That's you find on page 29. That'll be all on the Nigerian Tribune newspaper.
Yes, you had a lot of information. Okay, moving on to the Blueprint newspaper. The top of it, you see inflation beyond forces of demand, supply. Rwanda is saying on page 23, Zamfara crisis, I don't care if APC implodes. Rafa is saying on okay, you can continue reading the story on page 6. Why banks need to forge partnership with fintechs. CR2 saying on page 23, Nigeria earns more from non-oil revenue. Osibanjo has come out to say on page 24 of the Blueprint newspaper. Federal government replies US-based gate on terrorism. You are a distraction, pesky irritant. Says group wants to weaken ongoing insurgency fight. All of that can be found on page 6. And then Zamfara, 4 months after, bandits free 3 kidnapped 3-year-olds and demand 40 million naira ransom for 13 Zaria local government workers. 80-year-old victim rescued in Kanu. All of this can be found on page 5, page 15, and page 8 of the Blueprint newspaper. Siwez, Unilorin 400 level students injures a lecturer. That can be found on page 18. How ISWAP killed Army General in Bornu, Dume has come out to say on page 5. Obey court order, release my son. Widow tells police. That's on page 14. And Nigeria not among top investment destinations in Africa. A report has made that clear on page 23. And that's it on the Blueprint newspaper.
Okay, very quickly moving on to the leadership newspaper. Government officials not sponsoring terrorism, federal government declares. You can read up more on that. Okay, the writer under that says dismisses allegation as a disgusting distraction from counter-terrorism campaign. Troops kill top ISWAP commanders and 29 others. And DHQ denies warning soldiers against the coup. You can read up all of these on page 4. Why Abuja London flight is cheaper than Lagos London, stakeholders says. You can read up all of this on page 7. And moving on, Igbo presidency will end IPOB agitation, Ohaneze and Middle Belt say. Our interest is power shift, says Pandef. You can read up all of these on page 4. Bono plans Ruga for displaced elders. You can read up on page 17. APC begins sale of governorship forms for Ekiti and Osun states. You can read up all of this on page 6. Nigerian editors get 93.3 million naira from US for capacity building. More all of these stories can be found on page 6. And also, UBA rises $300 million senior notes program, page 25 of the leadership newspaper. Finally, NDLEA interrupts 4.9 billion cocaine and heroin consignment. All of this can be found on page 8 of the leadership newspaper.
Okay.
Sorry. Moving on to the Blueprint newspaper, at the very top right of the paper, inflation beyond forces of demand supply. Rewind. This you can find on page 23. Why banks need to forge partnership with fintechs. CR2. This you can also find on page 23. And at the top of it, Zamfara crisis. I don't care if APC implodes, says Marafa. The story is right there on the front page, and you can continue reading on page 6. And right under it says, conduct parallel Congress threatens court action. Ex-lawmakers thinking politicians, says Buni. Well, you can continue reading on page 6. Nigerian earns more from non-oil revenue, says Oshibajo. This you can find on page 24 of the Blueprint newspaper. Federal government replies US-based gate on terrorism. You are a distraction, pesky irritant. Aha. Says group want to weaken ongoing insurgency fight. Still on the Blueprint newspaper. Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. Sorry. Okay, I'll take a few one on the Daily Independent newspaper. Banks edge against new credit, prefer CBN LDR fines. The story is on the front page and you can continue reading. IPOB asked Southeast governors to release Biafran detainees. Page 7 of the Daily Independent. Military vows to deal with those drawing it into politics, says on page 7. Anyone who plots by my government's downfall will go down, says Wiki. Still on page 7 of the paper. I think there's much to read on page 7 of the Daily Independent. RMAFC assures on acceptable new revenue formula on page 29 of the Daily Independent. The story is right there. Don't allow direct primaries, Rose Cottle electoral bill. Saraki Okechukwu won. The story is on the front page and you can continue reading. Buhari attends IATF summit in South Africa today, page 2 of the paper. And lastly, Oyo's IGR growth result of hard work, says Makinde. This you can find on page 30 of the Daily Independent newspaper.
And that is pretty much about it that we can take on the newspaper review today. Trust you had a sort time. You also don't forget to follow us on all our social media platforms, on Facebook at Lagoon Radio Nigeria, on Twitter and on Instagram at Lagoonradio.Ng. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, LagoonTV, and to our news blog, Lagoon.News. You can also download our app on your Google Play Store, your App Store, depending on the device that you are using. So we'll see you again same time tomorrow from the hours of 9:30 to 10 a.m. West African time. It's still Lagoon Radio. My name is Olumakaiye, and with me in the studio is Shabi Olegbiadola Taiwo and Abigail Ininamba. Up next at 10 is the Moment of Truths by 10 a.m. Don't go nowhere. You'll be right back.
You are listening to Lagoon Radio.